everyone, welcome back. So today is part 2 of my little bridal makeup series. If you haven't seen part 1, make sure you check it out. I will link it up here for you. But in that we went over tips for bridal makeup and we broke down like different options for the different aspects of your makeup. And then for today's part 2, I'm going to be doing a tutorial taking some of those different options and different aspects to create this look right here. And then for the coming part 3, I'll be taking different options and different aspects to create a second bridal makeup tutorial. So definitely make sure you're subscribed for that. But for this look today, it's a little bit on the more natural side of things. It's still glam, but it's just that little bit softer. It's also more geared towards drier skin types. It's a more of a dewy base, but to balance that, it's more of a matte eye look. And overall, we were working with more cool tones for this look. So perfect if you're going to be wearing silver or white gold jewellery, or if you've more of a cool undertone in your skin, like if your skin is more of a pink undertone, then these kind of colours will be perfect. And then as I say, in the next video for the next bridal tutorial, it will be a different look, but you can totally like cherry pick different bits from different tutorials that suit the colours you want, or suit your skin tone, or suit your skin type, because that's really what your bridal makeup is about, is suiting you, suiting your preferences, suiting your style, and just making sure that you feel the best you possibly can feel in your makeup. So if you'd like to see how to get this bridal makeup look, then just keep watching. Okay, so like I said in part 1, I like to do eyes first, because if there's any fallout from the eyeshadow, or if I get like a little bit of mascara or anything on my cheek, there's no problem, I can just wipe it away. I haven't done my base yet. And I'm going to start by prepping my eyes with a base, and this is just going to give you like a clean canvas across your lid and remove any discoloration or cover up like if you can see any veins coming through your eyelid. So you can use something like a MAC paint pot, which is like a stiffer cream in a little jar. You can use P. Louise, do the whole range of eye bases in different shades and different colours. You can use a concealer if it works for you. And if you have dry skin, any of those should be perfect for you. If you have oily skin, you might want to use a primer first, or use something that's both a primer and a coloured base, but we'll get into that in the next tutorial. But today I'm going to start off by using a MAC paint pot, and this is in the shade Soft Ochre. So because this is my personal product, it's not part of my kit, I'm going to go in with my finger, and the warmth of my finger will just help soften that up. And we're applying that all over, so from the lashes right up to the brow, because we want it all to be one even tone. So straight away you can see the difference there. It's just evened out that whole skin tone and gotten rid of any darkness on the eyelid, and again just gives us a nice clean canvas that we can get started with our eyeshadows. Okay, so I've actually just done the eyeshadow for one eye off camera, so you can see the look that we're going for. So as I was saying, it is more cool toned neutrals, and it is a more of a matte eye with just a little touch of shimmer as a highlight, just in the inner corner and a little bit under the brow arch. But I definitely think like a matte eye look is definitely more like classic and chic. Okay, so to get to this stage, I have used 2 brushes, basically one for the eyeshadow and one for the liner, to keep it as simple as possible. So the style of brush that I'm using, and the one that I think is most versatile, is a pinched ferrule blending brush. So a blending brush is one that is fluffy and allows you to buff and blend colour on, rather than something that's flat and stiff and kind of pack colour on. So this is a blending brush because it has that fluffy top to it, but it's also a little bit more shaped. So it has a pinched ferrule, and the ferrule is this metal bit right here. And if I turn it to the side, you can kind of see that it's pinched in right here, and that just shapes the bristles to be a little bit more, just a little bit more flattened. It's not a flat brush, it's still quite fluffy. So you actually get a wider side here, and then when you turn it, it's a little bit thinner, as opposed to a blending brush that isn't pinched and that's more rounded. So as you can see, it's nice and fluffy, and when I'm turning it, it's the same width all the way around, and it's just more of that like circle shape. Whereas this is the one we're using, which has a wider side, a thinner side. So it's just a little bit more shaped like this. And it might seem like such a small little difference, but it actually gives the brush a lot more versatility. So you can use, say, the flat side of it right here to pack brush on, like you would with a general just flat eyeshadow brush. You can use the tip for blending, but it depends on which side you use it on. So we'll come to that when we get to the crease shadow. This one in particular that I'm holding is the Morphe M433. The Bridal Tools also does a 776. This one is a little stained with some pink eyeshadow. But again, it's a pinched ferrule blending brush, or the MAC 217 is a classic of that shape. So if you are going to buy one eyeshadow brush, that is the type that I would suggest. And as I say, that keeps things simple for this tutorial. What I'm going to do is in the next tutorial is use the brushes that I would normally use. So there might be a few different kind of blending brushes or a few different eye brushes. But just know that if you don't have a bunch of brushes, that's totally fine. But if I was to recommend one, it would be like that kind of pinched ferrule blending brush style. So that's the brush that I'm using for the shadows, and the palette that I'm using is the Naked Basics palette. So it's this little mini Neutrals palette, which comes in so handy for me. As you can see, I've hit pan on a few of those shades. And these are all mattes except for this first one, which is just like a light shimmery highlight colour. You then have two matte highlight colours, so like more of a yellow undertone and more of a pink undertone. Then you have a taupe transition shade, so it's like a beige, a cool undertoned beige colour, like a light taupe, a medium dark brown, and a matte black. So they're all mattes except for this first one, which is so handy for so many looks. But those are the kind of colours I'm using today, so if you have some similar ones in your collection, that's great. If not, and if you'd like these kind of colours, then I would recommend the Naked Basics palette. So the first shade that I'm going to go in with is that taupe transition colour. It's called Naked 2. And a transition colour is basically what transitions your crease colour out. So if you imagine the darkest brown that's in my crease, in the fold of my eye here, that's my crease colour. The transition colour is the one that's just above that, and it's helping it to blend out. So some people like to put down their darker colour first and then use a lighter colour to blend out the edges. I often like to do my lighter colour first and then add that bit of darkness and just move down a little bit, which is what we're going to do now. So I've dipped into the palette with the tip of the brush, so the fluffy side, and then because this is my transition colour and it's going to be the highest colour, to get a larger surface area, I'm making sure to use it on the wider side. So rather than using it on the flatter side where it's going to be a little bit more pinched and a little bit more precise, I'm going to turn it so that the colour just comes up that little bit higher. So if you look straight on in the mirror, you can see that fold in your eye, that's your eye crease. And above that is where we're popping this transition colour. So I'm using little circular motions to make sure that I'm not ending up with like a harsh line. Just little circles as I'm blending across. And I'm starting on the outer corner of my eye rather than the inner corner, because most of the colour, as you can see on this side, is concentrated on this outside, and that just gives like a lifted effect. And wherever you start your eyeshadow, that's generally where most of the colour is going to be deposited. So rather than starting in here, and we actually want most of our colour to be out here, that would just create more work for us. So we'll just start out here, blend most of the colour out there, and then start to bring it into the inner corner. So that is my transition shade, which is sitting between the fold in my crease and my brow. It's right in the middle there. And as you can see, that just gives a really light shadow in the crease, which might be enough for you. It depends on the product that you're using and how pigmented it is, how dark it is, all that. But even something as subtle as this might be enough if you're going for like a really soft eye. If you want to amp it up and if you want to make it like a little bit more smoky out here, we'll then dip into the darker brown. So we started with this taupe and we're going into more of a brown. Again, on the tip of the brush. And this time I am using it on that skinnier side. So rather than being on the flip side where it's covering more space this way, I'm going to flip it this way so it's covering more space this way, if that makes sense. And for this darker colour, I'm just going to start by just patting it onto the outer corner of the actual lid. So just under my crease, and then taking a little bit more and blending it into the crease. So in around where that actual fold in your eye is, and blending it up like a little bit higher than that as well. And again, I'm using little circles with my brush to avoid having a stripe. And with this darker shade, I am only going to keep it on kind of the outer half of that crease. So rather than bringing it all the way into the corner, I'm just going to keep it out here. Again, it just keeps the accentuation on the outer corner of the eye and just lifts it a little bit and elongates the eye a little bit. And so because we already have that taupe transition colour, that kind of beigey colour, there's very little blending out for me to do with the brown. If I had just gone in with a dark brown, I'd really have to work on blending those edges and making them really smooth. Whereas because we already have that transition colour down, it just makes blending that little bit easier. And as you can see, that just darkens up the outer half of the crease. At this stage, what I'm also going to do is take that and run it just along the lower lash line. So just to make that easier, you can put your chin down and kind of look up a little bit into a mirror and kind of squint your eyes, and that'll just open up some of that space for you. So it's just going under your lower lashes. It's not going in the waterline, you're not going on top of your lashes. If you just pop your brush under your lashes, just to get a little bit of shading under the eye, nothing crazy. So it just kind of balances out the eye. So next onto the lid. Now we already have our eye primed with that base, so the lid is already nice and bright, but just to make it pop that little bit more and just to give a little bit more contrast between the lid and the crease, we're now going to go in with a matte highlight colour. So I'm going to use the one that's slightly pinky undertoned, just to tie in with the cool undertones that we're doing. And this time I'm not taking the colour on the tip of the brush, I'm taking it on the flat of the brush. Either side will do, but just to be sure, I am just literally on the back of my hand just going to dust off any of that excess brown that's on there, just in case it picks up and goes onto our eye where we don't want it. So I'm dipping in with the side of the brush And this time I'm going to start in the inner corner and wipe it out to meet that little bit of brown that we put on the outer corner. Again, wherever you start, that's where most of the colours are going to be deposited. And we want our lighter colours more on the inside. So that just pops the eyelid a little bit more, just giving the illusion of a bit more space and just a brighter eye. Now, if for whatever reason, maybe if you were a bit too heavy-handed, if you do find that there is like a stark difference between your little bit of brown here and your cream colour on the lid, you can just take your beige colour, your first transition colour, and just feather in between the two to help blend those two together. So now that we have that eyeshadow done, we're going to add some eyeliner to define the eye. Now we're not going to be using like a pencil eyeliner or a liquid or a gel. What we're actually going to do is use a matte black eyeshadow. So it's perfect that there is a matte black in this palette already. And then the brush that I'm using is a little angled brush like this. You could also use a flat top little push liner brush if you happen to have one in your collection. You just want something small and thin that can get close to your lashes, because the benefit of using a black shadow rather than a black liner is you get that darkness because it's black, but it's a lot softer. So that means that you don't get that like harsh line effect, but also it's more forgiving. So if you're not great at doing eyeliner, using a powder doesn't show up like every little wobble and wiggle the same way like a liquid would. So like as you can see the difference in the eyes here, this one has the powder liner. It just defines the eye. It has that little bit of darkness, but it's really soft. It doesn't look like eyeliner. So I'm just going to pick up some of that black shadow and just tap off that brush. If you hear that noise, it's just me tapping off my brush, and what that does is it just gets rid of any loose shadow that was like just sitting on the edge of the bristles and that would fall down onto your cheek when you go onto the eye. It just taps off any excess basically. So I have the shadow on the top of the brush here, and with an angled brush you want to move in the direction of the shorter side. So if I'm pulling my eyeshadow out this way, my shorter side is on the direction I'm moving, which is this way. And then if I want to pull it in this way, I'll switch it around so the shorter side is on this side, which is this way. So what I tend to do is just start in the middle and pull it out here, because you can be that little bit thicker on the outer half of the eye. Again, it just elongates and slightly lifts the eye, whereas on the inner corner, that's where you want to be a bit more careful and keep it nice and thin. So I'll just do the outside first, and then I'll just be that little bit more careful and just get that bit tighter into the lash roots. And what I'll often do then is just take whatever's left on the brush, place the brush down on the line that we just created on the very outer corner, and just do some little flicky motions upwards just to feather out that liner so it just doesn't come to like an abrupt end, especially if you use quite a lot of black and it does look quite harsh. You can just use little flicky motions just to fade that out. If that's not doing enough for you, what you can also do is just take your brown, the darker brown that we used on your little blending brush, and just feather over the edge of it as well. Nothing is permanent with makeup. If you make a mistake, it's fine, it's all fixable, don't panic. So all I'm doing now is just making sure that they're more or less even. Again, with an eyeshadow, it doesn't show up as obvious, but that is just the other thing to keep in mind, is just to get them as even as you can. So now I'm just going to curl my lashes and apply a coat of mascara. You want to use a waterproof mascara for your wedding day, in case there's any few tears. I actually need a new mascara at the moment, so I'm just using kind of one that I have to hand. So with your mascara, you're just doing little wiggles at the base and pulling upwards just to make sure that you're coating every lash from the root to the tip. Now some of you may be blessed with lovely long lashes or very curly lashes. I have neither. I have just kind of straight, short lashes that don't like to curl very well. And you might be able to see I got a few little dots of mascara. If that happens, leave it, wait for it to dry, and then you can kind of flick it off later. So that's what I'm going to do. So now that we have some mascara on, the next step would be lashes. Now if you have lovely long and thick lashes, you don't necessarily need them. They are a nice addition for photos. They do just emphasize your eyes that little bit more, but like everything, it's totally up to you and what you're comfortable with. So we went through the options in part one. What I'm going to do today is some little half lashes or corner lashes. So if you're doing your lashes yourself, it's whatever's easiest for you. You don't want too much stress. If there's someone who can do lashes for you, you could maybe have a little bit more choice. So the ones that I'm going to be using here are from a JLo and Inglot collaboration. You actually get 2 sets of half lashes. You can also get number 307s, which a lot of different brands do. I'm not even sure if this brand is just a generic 307. Or what you can do is just DIY them and cut a strip that you already have. It would just want to be kind of more of like a light natural lash rather than something that's too thick and heavy, because then what you'll end up is with your natural lashes here and then just like a random clump of really thick false lashes. So if you do have a pair of strip lashes that are nice and light and natural, then you can cut them in half, and then it just depends on the length which side you would use. If they weren't too long, you could probably use the outer corner and pop that on the outer corner, but if you find that's a little bit too long, then you can use the inner corner, which will be a little bit shorter. So in terms of glue, my go-to is the squeezy tubes of the Duo glue. This one with the pink writing is the dark tone, so it will dry black. It comes out grey and it dries black. And you can get the one with the blue writing, which comes out white and dries clear. I would recommend the clear one if you're more of a beginner, because if you accidentally get glue anywhere, it's just going to dry clear and it'll be fine. So you're just going to squeeze a little bit of glue out from the top and just apply that just to the lash band. The important thing then is to let it get tacky. If I went straight in with this, the glue is basically wet and it's just going to slide around and not stick down. So if you've had that problem with putting down lashes in the past where they're just not sticking down, it could be that you're not waiting long enough for your glue to get tacky. So with the darker glue, when I can start to see some of the patches turning black and turning dark, that's when I know that it's kind of halfway between wet and dry. And if you were using the lighter glue, some of it would start to turn kind of translucent and you know that it's drying, which is when you want to stick it down. So I'm just going to set this aside and glue my other side as well. So now that that is drying, I've picked it up on some tweezers and I'm going to come down and place it flat against the top of my lashes and just push it into the lash roots and making sure that the corners of that strip are definitely stuck down. And that's it. Like with a regular long strip, there's normally a lot more fiddling with getting the corners down because it has to bend around the shape of your eyelid. Whereas with a half lash or a strip lash, it doesn't have that much bending to do on one half of your eyelid. And that's why I just find them so easy. Just sticking it down, putting down the outer corner, putting down the inner corner. So again, it's just accentuated on the outer half, so it just lifts the eye that little bit, gives it like a slight kind of cat eye shape, and just kind of elongates the eye a little bit. Now the only thing you want to make sure of is that the inner corner of it, so the part that's actually sitting in the middle of your eye, isn't sticking up. It's sitting flat against the lashes, because you don't want it to be like soft natural lashes and then bam, fake lashes sticking up. So I would just like help push it down while it's drying in place. So at this stage, I'm just going to take a little extra step just to make sure that they're nice and blended into my natural lash line. And to do that, I'm just going to take again some of our black eyeshadow on that little angled brush and just go over the lash band and the inner part of the liner, just to make sure that that line is nice and fluid. And also by going over the lash band with that little bit of black shadow, that's going to take down any shine from the glue. So whether you're using a dark glue or a clear glue, they tend to dry shiny, which can make them show up as lash glue. So just to conceal it even more and use even more trickery and make them even more natural, I'm just taking that little bit of your black shadow over the top, just mattifies that down. So I was about to say that that is the eyes done, but I did forget one little element that I did on this side, and just like a tiny little touch of shimmer on the inner corner and just under the brow arch. But just to give you a little option, you can totally have it just as all mattes. I think that's lovely. Or if you want to just add a little bit more dimension, we'll just take that shimmery shade that's in the front of that palette, and I'm picking that up. I'm actually kind of picking up kind of in between the tip and the side, kind of on the corner. See, these brushes just have so many edges and sides to use. And I'm just going to pop that into the inner corner here, and I'll actually just pump up this side a little bit more, and a tiny little bit just really lightly feathered under the arch of the brow, and it just picks up the light ever so slightly, but that's totally optional. So that is the eyes done. It did take longer than normal because obviously I'm explaining every single step and giving options and describing things, but normally that would be a fairly quick eyeshadow process. You just have your beige, brown, a cream on the lid, and then your little bit of black shadow on your lashes, and that's just like a really soft eye, but still with enough definition that it's going to show up in pictures. And that is kind of the balance to find if you do want to err on the slightly more softer natural side of things. If it's too natural, it might be perfect in person, but in pictures it mightn't show up. The pictures will kind of take down some of that makeup, And you also have to keep in mind that a lot of your pictures are going to be at least waist up, if not full length. So you're going to be quite far back in the pictures rather than what you're seeing in the mirror, which is like really close up. Now you might get some pictures that are just your portraits as well, but the majority of our pictures are going to be that bit further back, and that's why little things like having some false lashes will just make your eyes pop for those pictures. So now we're going to move on to the skin. Now, as I said, this base is going to be more geared towards drier skin types, whereas I am oily, which you might be able to see from the fact that I'm already a grease ball. So I'm just going to blot off some of that oil. I need to stock up on my blotting sheets, which if you have oily skin are a great thing to have, especially for a wedding day for touch-ups. But what I'm using right now is just like one ply of tissue. If you are oily and you still want to do more of like a dewy foundation situation, that rhymed, you can counteract that a little bit with your primer and your powder choices. But for drier skin types, what I love for a primer is the Photo Finish Primerizer from Smashbox, which is a primer and moisturizer in one. So it's a lovely moisturizing primer. So I'm just going to use a little bit of that today on myself, even though normally I wouldn't, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm not getting married today. It doesn't matter if it doesn't last. So brush wise for foundation, you might very well have a foundation brush that works for you. That's cool, you can probably use whatever you have. But if you are in the market for a foundation brush, I prefer more buffing style brushes. So they tend to be like bigger, thicker, kind of kabuki style brushes like this that you can use with circular motions to buff the foundation into the skin and also stipple on top to add coverage, as opposed to like the old school flat foundation brushes that you kind of more paint on. And my favourite one is from Nema brush. I believe this is called like the round topped kabuki buffing foundation brush. I'll have the proper name inserted. I also really like the Real Techniques buffing brush, or even the Real Techniques contour brush. I use this a lot on clients. I tend to like a bigger brush myself, but if you get the core set that these two come in, and then you get also like, I think it's a lip brush or something, or a concealer brush. I think it's a set of 4, but these two come together in a set. And while this is lovely for like cream contours and stuff, it's also lovely for foundation. And then you can also get like flat top ones like this. And this is the Sedona Lace FB07. But as I say, you can probably use whatever you have, but just some recommendations if you wanted them. So do you know what? I actually will just go in with the contour brush from Real Techniques and just take a little bit of that primer. So like I was just saying, the kind of primer that you use really depends on your skin type and your skin concerns. And if you're very combination, like if you're really oily just in the T-zone and nowhere else, you could just use a mattifying primer just in those areas just to balance it out. You don't have to take them all over the skin. Or if you have like larger pores in the center of the cheeks, you can just take a smoothing primer and just use it in those areas. You can target and precision prime as well. So for the foundation that you use itself, if you have something that works for you, that's tried and true, then brilliant, go ahead and use that. If not, obviously there's hundreds and thousands of options out there, but these are just a couple of recommendations that I have that I like to use in my kit on drier skin types for bridal. So the first would be the Armani Luminous Silk Foundation. This is kind of more of a liquidy consistency, so it's a little bit thinner in terms of coverage. It's not like a sheer coverage at all, but it'd be more like a medium. So if you want to cover a lot, I probably wouldn't initially go to this one. And you can of course layer it with concealer and that, but I would probably go for something with a little bit more coverage. So I also have here the NARS Natural Radiant Longwear Foundation, and this would be more medium buildable full. Coverage wise, it's a little bit thicker in consistency, and it is great for long wear because it is slightly tacky. That sounds like a bad word that you'd want in your foundation, but it just has like a slightly tacky finish to it, so it does stick to your skin and hold for a long time, which is great for bridal and weddings. And then the third and fourth, actually, I kind of have 2 here, is the Inglot HD foundations, as well as the Inglot All Covered foundations. I find them quite similar, to be honest. I just find that the consistency of the All Covered is a bit more like the NARS Longwear, but in terms of like finish and coverage, I actually find it quite similar to the HDs. So in my mind, like when I'm selecting a foundation for a certain skin type, I kind of tend to lump them in together. But for me, the main difference is they are different shade ranges. So normally that's the reason I pick one over the other. But the Inglot foundations, and they would also be more like medium full kind of coverage. So today for myself, I'm actually going to go ahead and use the NARS Longwear foundations. So I'm going in with the colour Punjab. So I kind of started down here on the chin just because, number one, I was just testing the colour at first, but also I have some breakouts and redness. Well, I have some breakouts and redness on my cheeks too. My skin is not being great at the moment. But I would tend to start the application where you have things that you want to cover. Normally that tends to be like the cheek area and kind of more the center of the face. But for me, I do get like breakouts on the chin and jawline and stuff. But like say if you were starting in more the center of the face and blending it out towards the perimeters of your face where generally you mightn't have breakouts and things, it can be that bit sheerer. That's kind of a tip that's often given that I see like in videos or magazines or whatever, like start in the center of your face and blend out. But that's why, is because you don't tend to need a lot of coverage on the outside of your face. But if you're like me and you get breakouts on the outside of your cheek and the jawline and the chin, then that doesn't necessarily apply. So while I'm applying this all over, I'm basically making sure that number one, I'm covering every part and there's not like a patch where I missed, but also that I'm buffing it into the skin and it's not sitting on top. So basically we're making sure that it's all even in terms of the color and it's all even in terms of the texture. It's all buffed in evenly. You're getting rid of any little maybe brush strokes that are coming up. So now that that's buffed in all over, I'm just taking an extra little bit on the brush. I'm just going to push and stipple over areas that I want a little bit more coverage. To be fair, it has pretty good coverage already, but just because my preference tends to be a fuller coverage, I'm just adding a little bit just in certain areas. You don't want to go in like a thick layer all over. It starts to look very cakey and mask-like, but you do want to make sure that you're comfortable and confident with the coverage that you're getting. So for concealer then, again, there's loads of options out there. Just as a recommendation, a concealer that I like to use for slightly drier skin types would be the Born This Way Multi-Use Sculpting Concealer from Too Faced. So ordinarily you could apply it with the doe foot, but because these are from my kit, I'm working from a palette. So I'm going to be applying and blending that out with a fluffy synthetic brush. So it's a concealer brush that kind of looks like an eye blending brush, and you could actually use it as an eyeshadow blending brush, but it's with synthetic hairs, so the kind of hairs that you would find in like a foundation brush. And that just means that it's going to pick up creams better and it's going to clean off creams better. So I'm going in with a shade that's lighter than my foundation. It might be a little bit too light, but we'll see. And I'm going under the eye, and I'm also just bringing a little bit of that down onto the cheek. So we're getting that V shape, and the same on the other side. And I always feel like seeing other people do this or watching it on videos, it always looks like a lot of concealer, but I'm really only just dipping the tip of the brush into the concealer that's on the palette. And the reason we do that is because we're actually highlighting the face. We're bringing attention to certain areas by using a lighter shade. So I'm also going to do that down the center of the face. Which balances out that lightness that we have going on under the eye, and it just draws the eye in towards the center of the face. And rather than just being one flat color, it gives your face more dimension. So I've just applied it just in the center of the forehead, just down low, not up high, because that would make my forehead look bigger, whereas I'm trying to make it look smaller. So just down low here, so it's like you're kind of saying this is the center of my forehead, just lowering that down. A little bit down the center of the nose, above the cupid's bow, and a little bit on the chin. I bring mine out a little bit further here as well, because just with my face shape, I have slightly chubbier cheeks and I have very little chin, and I tend to get like a shadow just here. So I just try and counteract that with a little bit of highlighting. So now that we've that all placed down and we're looking crazy, we're going back to our foundation brush and blending it out. I like to blend out the center of my face first, because that gives my concealer time to set. And when it sets, that means that when I go in to blend it out, it's not going to move around so much. So it's going to stay put and give a little bit extra coverage. Whereas if I was to just apply it and blend it out straight away, I would get that little bit less coverage, because it would be still very creamy and very movable. Not that it's completely dry by any means, it is still creamy and all that, but just to give it a little bit of time to set and get a little bit more tacky rather than wet. So I'm first just blending out the point where it meets the foundation, just to make sure that that is seamless, that we're not getting any line of demarcation there. And then I can blend out right under the eyes, and I'll start by using more patting motions, again to try and keep as much coverage as I can by not moving it, by just pressing it. That's pretty much blended out, and because this brush is nice and small, I can get up under the eye, but I could also switch back to my little concealer brush and maybe just wipe off some of the excess because I'm not trying to add much product. I'm just blending it out, and that would allow me to get right up under the eye and blend it to where the point that it meets the eyeshadow that's under the eye. If you find that you've come up too high and you've basically covered up any shadow that was under there, that's totally fine. You can just go back in with that little bit of shadow and touch it up. That often happens. So that is all of our coverage, and now is to powder and just to set it in place. Make sure that we're taking away any excess shine and just making sure that we're locking it in place for the day. So a powder that I love for drier skin types, or even if I'm just doing like a matte foundation and a matte base and I feel like it's going to be a little bit too matte and too flat when I powder over the top, I like to use a powder that has like the slightest sheen to it. Not shimmer, not shine, just like the slightest little bit of a glow to it. They tend to be like baked powders or mineralized powders, like the Mineralized Skin Finish from MAC. But I also like the Kiko Radiant Fusion baked powders. They come in little silver compacts like this. You can get them online, cheap enough. I actually need to reorder some of my shades because I've really gone to pan on some of them. So for brushes, again, if you have something that works, use that. If you are looking for a recommendation, again, to keep it more simple and something that's more multifunctional, the kind of face powder brush that I like tends to have more of like a tapered shape. So something like these, where it's a little bit thicker underneath and then it comes up to a slightly smaller point. You can get ones that are more pointy, like a tulip shape like this, or ones that are more rounded on the top, which I personally prefer. And these ones here, this is the Real Techniques blush brush. Real Techniques, again, they're easy to get. They're in Boots in pharmacies and they're reasonably priced. This is Sedona Lace FB03 and this is the Morphe E3. So I'm going to go ahead with the Real Techniques. So I'm first just going to set under my eyes, and before I do that I'm just going to check that any creasing hasn't happened, which it hasn't. Brilliant. If it has, if you have found that the concealer has already settled into your fine lines, just go in with like your little concealer brush or like the tip of your foundation brush and just blend it out, or even like your ring finger, just pat it out before you set it, because if you set it with powder, that's then going to lock those creases in place, which we don't want. So I'm just going to push that powder over the top, and the reason I'm pushing rather than swirling or swiping is again just to keep as much of that coverage underneath that I can. I don't want to move it too much if I can avoid it. And because these are dewier products on my oily skin, they're not very set and they would move if I push them around too much. So you might be able to see on camera that has taken down all of the excess shine, but because the kind of powder that it is, it's left me with like a light sheen to the skin so that it doesn't look too over powdered or too unnatural. So now that we're all evened out and powdered, we're going to add some bronzer to the face and add some extra colour and dimension back into the skin. And the bronzer that I'm going to be using is the Isadora bronzing powder in the shade 03 Golden Tan. And this actually has a slight sheen to it, so again it's nice for drier skin types that want to keep that little bit of a shine to the skin. And because this is a bronzer rather than a contour, I don't mind it having a little bit of a sheen. If it was a contour, I'd want it completely matte. We'll get into that in the next video, but today we're just bronzing. We're not going to be doing too much contour. So we're using that same brush, and this time rather than going right in like I did with the face powder where I basically went right in, swirled all over and then just went over because I was covering a big surface area, I want to be a little bit more precise in my placement. So rather than swirling in like this, I'm going to be a little bit softer and just swirl the top bristles in. This is why this kind of tapered shape helps, because depending how much pressure you apply, if it's just a little bit or if it's more, you can control where the brush picks up the product. I hope that makes sense. So I am swirling the brush in the product, but just lightly. And that'll just give me the bronzer just on the tip of the brush here. So the areas I'm going to place this now are going to be the hairline, under / on the cheekbone, and a little bit under the jawline as well. And that's just going to give a little bit of dimension. It's not like sculpting out the face in any harsh contour, but we're just adding that little bit of colour back in. So I'm starting around the hairline, and because I know that the product is just on the tip of the brush, I can be a little bit bigger with the circles that I'm using on the skin, and I can apply that little bit more pressure, and the rest of the bristles will do the work in terms of blending. This is why brushes make such a big difference in how the product goes on. And with the cheekbone, I'm starting at the back and blending forward. Again, I want most of the colour to be back here and to get softer towards the front. So it's like with the eyeshadow, wherever you place your brush down first, that's where most of the colour is going to be deposited. So I start at the back and just blend it forward. I'll just take a little bit under the jawline as well, just try and minimise some of that double chin. So you should be able to see the difference there. On this side it's just a little bit more flat and one colour, like except for like the brightness under the eye and that. Whereas this side has more dimension and it's just more tanned. So a mistake that a lot of people make is when they want to have a little bit more colour to their skin is they'll just go a little bit darker with their foundation, and that's when they end up having like that line of where you can clearly see the foundation ends and their natural skin colour starts. Whereas you can go with your natural skin colour for your foundation and your concealer and then just bronze up in certain areas and it gives a much more natural effect. So I'm just going to do that on the other side. And again, even though it's a powder, it's not looking overly powdered and overly matte because there is a little bit of a sheen to that bronzer. So I have just realised that I would probably normally do my brows after powdering. I tend to switch up when I do my brows and when I do it on clients. So we will get to the brows, but we're just going to finish the cheek products now that we're here. So we're going to go in with a slightly pinky blush, and the reason I'm going pinky rather than peachy is to tie in with those cooler tones that we have on the eye, whereas a peach blush would be more warm toned. So just some pink tone blushes that I like would be the MAC the Pro Longwear blush in the shade Stay Pretty. It's just a real pink. It looks quite bright and quite vibrant in the pan, but you're just using a light application of it. It's just a lovely flushed pink colour. And the Inglot 127 Freedom blush, it's much more muted and soft, but it does have that pink undertone. This is the kind of blush that I like for myself. I tend to go for those more muted tones, whether it's pink or peach or coral or whatever it is. I like something that is a little bit more muted, just for myself. And then another one that I forgot to pull out, but I really like for paler skin tones is the Benefit blush in the shade Dandelion. It's a really soft pale blush and has like a slight sheen to it. But for my own skin, because I have a lot of texture, I do like a blush that is more matte and that isn't going to highlight any of those scars or texture. So I'm going in with the 127 from Inglot, and this time I'm not dipping directly straight down. I'm not going on its flat, I'm kind of going on the corner, if that makes sense, in between the two. If it was flat, it would be too much surface area, and if I was the tip, it would be too small, whereas that's just a nice size for blush. And I'm just tapping off the excess. And I like to apply my blush to the apples of the cheeks and blend backwards just above the bronzer. Like not up on the cheekbone, it would look very 80s up that high, but just slightly lifted. So I like to just use a little bit at a time and really just feather it on with a light hand, starting at the front and feathering it out backwards. And what I tend to do then is go back to my foundation brush with nothing else on it, and just either stipple or kind of feather the edges just to make sure that you can't see any like demarcation of where the blush ends, so that it's all just blending in together. So for a highlight, one of my go-tos for my kit is the MAC Mineralized Skin Finish in Soft and Gentle. It's just a lovely neutral shade, and it's not like too intense but not like a nothing kind of a highlight. It's just super versatile, and rather than going in with a smaller like highlight brush like this, which would give me a more compact application and make it that bit stronger and brighter, because again we're erring on the slightly softer side of things, I'm going to keep with that big powder brush that we had, and I'm just giving it a dust off on the back of my hand. Again, it's my own brush. I'm just dipping into that, tapping off the excess. I'm just going to hit the tops of my cheekbones. There's already a bit of shine coming through from my skin, but just add a little bit more. And then you can add like a little bit above the brow arch, not all the way across the brow, but just above the brow arch there. You can do a little bit on the Cupid's bow, and again this bigger brush is making the application softer. If you wanted it more intense, you can use a smaller brush, but again we'll do that in the next tutorial. And you can do a little bit on the center of the nose too. I'm not doing too much because again the oils are starting to seep through my skin. So now that our skin is perfected and powdered and bronzed and blushed and highlighted, I'm going to come back to the brows. Now the way that you fill in your brows will depend on the kind of brow that you like, how natural or defined you like it, how dark or light you like them, and also how much brows you have there, how much filling in needs to be done, etc, etc. But for this look we're going to go for a slightly more naturalish brow. I'm not going to do nothing at all because again for photos I'd want them to be a little bit more defined than they are. But for me, like I do have fuller brows, there are definitely gaps that need to be filled. So I'm just going to go in with a little brow pencil. This one is the Urban Decay Brow Blade. It actually has a brow pen on one side and a brow pencil on the other. A little micro brow pencil. A lot of brands do them. NYX do them, which are quite affordable. You can get them in some Boots or Debenhams, if Debenhams exists. But just a little micro brow pencil that is nice and small, so you can just fill in gaps rather than something that's going to be too big and chunky that's going to give you too much product. So I have some sparseness underneath here, some sparseness up here. I'm just using a light hand and little strokes so that it doesn't end up being too blocky. And just with those few strokes you might be able to see it's just that little bit more perfected and filled in and shaped. But basically I'm just not going in with like long strokes that will give me like a really defined shape. It's just filling in gaps with little hair-like strokes. So I'm just going to brush all my hairs off now just to see if there's any areas that I missed, which normally shows up when you brush the hairs up. And I'll just get those little areas. And then just brush them back into place and also brush through that product so there's not too much sitting in the brow. But obviously the end result is going to be different depending on how full your brows are, how dark they are, all that kind of thing. But the aim of the game with this look is just filling in those little gaps. So to complete the look we're going to do a pinky nudie lip. I am not like a bright pink but just something more natural and soft. But again, a pink that would tie in with our cool tones. But I'm first just going to line my lips with this liner from Luna by Lisa in the shade Honeymoon. And this is like a pinky brown liner. And I'm also just feathering that into the lip. So that has just defined my lip shape before the colour goes on. So I have a number of glosses from Luna by Lisa here in front of me. I'm going to take a little bit of Pink Ruby. We'll see what that's like. So I just applied a little bit to the centre, blended it in with my lips, and I'm just going in with my finger just to tone that down. It was just a little bit too bright pink, but also because I have that brownie pink or yeah, more kind of a brownie nude liner, it's mixing with that to tone it down. But I just want to soften it out. And that finishes the look. So that is it for the first tutorial in this little mini bridal makeup series. Again, I will be doing a second tutorial with some different options, different techniques, and more geared towards oilier skin. So definitely subscribe if you want to see that. If you have any questions at all so far, you can pop them in the comments. You can pop me a DM on Instagram. I'm at ChristineMUA. And yeah, again, make sure you check out part 1 if you haven't seen it, and stay tuned for part 3. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you on the next one. Bye guys.